What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. There is a certain moment in every war when reality stops following the manuals. When all the glossy brochures about integrated defense systems, multinational supply chains and long-term procurement cycles, all this collides head-on with something far simpler and far more brutal. The need to survive tonight. Not next year, not after another summit, no, tonight. Ukraine is living in that moment right now. Missiles still come down, drones still swarm, power grids still go dark, and the promised systems from abroad arrive slowly, selectively, or not at all. Not to diminish the impact and the assistance of the West, of course. But, well, guys, I guess you understand what I mean. So instead of waiting, Ukraine did what it has been forced to do repeatedly throughout this war. It started building its own answers, fast, cheap, and often in places that were never meant to host cutting-edge defense technology. One of those answers now fits in the back of a pickup truck and quietly reaches into the sky with invisible force. No sound, no marketing, no, just pure results. To understand how Ukraine got here, why this shift matters, and what it means for the future of air defense, we need to unpack this story step by step. And that begins with how necessity rewrites the rules. In a perfect world, air defense is orderly. Layers of radars, carefully synchronized interceptors, long-range systems backed by deep inventories, and engineers who get years to refine every component. Well, Ukraine does not live in that world. It lives in a place where incoming threats are cheap, numerous, and relentless, while defensive resources are scarce, expensive, and politically constrained. Firing $1 million interceptor at a device powered by an engine you might find in a garden equipment makes absolutely no sense on paper. But when human beings are being targeted by that device, well, obviously paper logic stops mattering. This mismatch forced Ukrainian engineers and military planners into an uncomfortable realization. Waiting for proper solutions was no longer an option, so instead of chasing perfection, they chased efficiency. What can be built quickly were the questions. What can be repaired locally? What can be scaled without begging 10 different foreign committees for approval? And that exact mindset produced a new generation of improvised but increasingly sophisticated systems, including laser platforms designed not for prestige, but just for practicality. One of the most recent ones is called the Sunray. These systems do not announce themselves. They do not thunder across the battlefield. No, they just sit quietly, track targets with cameras, software being in the bed of a pickup truck once again, and just do their work without spectacle. The absence of drama is the point. In a conflict where every sound can betray a position, silence becomes a feature, not a flaw. And when something falls from the sky without warning, the message spreads fast that this place is no longer safe. What makes this approach so scary for the Russian military is not just what it can do, but how accessible it is. These tools do not require billion-dollar factories or decade-long programs. No, they just require smart engineers, components you can buy in your local home improvement store, and a very clear understanding of what matters most right now. That shift away from prestige towards survival-driven engineering explains exactly why Ukraine is moving faster than countries with far deeper pockets. And once you understand this urgency, it becomes easier to see how leadership itself began to change. Which brings us naturally to the people now tasked with stitching all these pieces together, something we should explore further in our next chapter. When people imagine the architects of national air defense, they picture lifelong generals, bureaucrats raised inside ministries, or executives in tailored suits. Well, Ukraine's reality looks very different. Some of the figures now shaping its protective shield come from television studios, startup workshops, and hobbyist circles that, well, just a few years ago had absolutely nothing to do with the national defense. That background is not a weakness, it is precisely why things are changing. These individuals learned to improvise long before the war demanded it. They are used to working without permission, without guarantees, and without the luxury of delay. If they want to do something, they just simply do it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. When the invasion began, many simply repurposed what they already had. Studios became assembly spaces, savings accounts became procurement budgets, and professional networks became supply chains. Early results were not elegant, but they worked well enough to attract attention, support, and even eventually military orders. This blending of civilian creativity with battlefield necessity created a culture where ideas are tested quickly and discarded just as fast if they fail. No one waits years to admit a concept that doesn't work. No one clings to a system because it looks good in presentations. If it protects people, it stays. If it doesn't, it's gone. Simple as that. That mentality is now being applied at scale with leadership tasked not in inventing a single miracle solution, but with organizing dozens of imperfect ones into something coherent. And so obviously the challenge is immense. Different tools for different threats, cheap solutions for cheap attacks, scarce high-end systems reserved for what truly demands them. Efficiency becomes doctrine. You do not simply waste your best resources on the wrong problem. As these leaders coordinate engineers, manufacturers, and units scattered across the country, another transformation is unfolding quietly in the parallel, which is that the rise of an entire ecosystem built to counter aerial threats to scale. And to understand how deep that ecosystem runs, we need to zoom in on the factories, the workshops, and the relentless pace of production, something that deserves its own attention and closer look in our next chapter. Step inside one of Ukraine's new defense workshops, and it feels less like a military installation and more like a startup on overdrive. Rows of 3D printers work non-stop. Plastic melts, cools, and becomes components within hours. Software updates roll out faster than many commercial apps. Definitely banking apps. Everything is designed with just one single question in mind. How many can we make, and how quickly can we replace what's lost? Speed matters because losses are inevitable. Facilities are targeted, equipment disappears overnight, entire production lines can vanish in a single strike. And yet, instead of stopping, production disperses. Smaller sites, redundant setups, knowledge shared instead of trademarked. If one location goes offline, another picks up the slack. It's resilience by design, born from hard lessons learned early in the war. This approach has allowed Ukrainian manufacturers to do something many doubted if it was even possible, which is produce defensive tools in quantities that actually match the scale of the threat. Interceptors are no longer rare artifacts, they're consumables, designed to be used, lost, and replaced without collapsing the system that made them. That precise mindset alone represents a radical departure from traditional defense economics. But with that power comes responsibility, of course. When tools become cheap, fast, and widely available, control becomes harder. Even the engineers building them understand the risks. A device that can quietly wait at altitude does not care about borders or intentions, because once released into the world, technology develops its own momentum. The line between defense and danger blurs uncomfortably fast, and yet Ukraine does not have the luxury of hesitation. Every delay is paid for by civilians living under the constant threat. The question is no longer whether these tools are perfect or even safe in the abstract, but whether not deploying them is worse. That calculation drives decisions that might terrify peacetime planners, but make sense when the alternative is darkness, cold, fear, potentially even death. As this production machine accelerates, attention shifts from the workshop to the streets, to the people that these systems are meant to protect, and the daily realities that force such drastic innovation in the first place. To understand why none of this feels optional, why it had to be done, we need to look at the life under this threat itself, which is exactly where we're heading in our final chapter. For communities closest to the front lines, theory collapses into routine. People learn when to step outside, when to wait, and when to cancel plans altogether. Weather becomes a variable in survival calculations. Clear skies mean danger, rain brings, brief relief. This is not abstract strategy, it's a lived experience repeated day after day. Traditional defenses struggle here. Expensive systems cannot be everywhere at once. No one wants to waste limited high-end interceptors on devices that cost a fraction of the response. So gaps appear, and those gaps are exploited relentlessly. This is where Ukraine's improvised solutions begin to matter the most, not because they stop everything, but because they stop just enough. They do not promise invincibility, unfortunately, and not yet. They just promise reduction. Fewer outages, fewer emergencies, fewer moments when an entire city holds its breath waiting for the impact. That incremental improvement changes psychology as much as it changes statistics. People notice when nights are quieter. They notice when infrastructure survives one more week. But still, unfortunately, limits remain. Some threats require tools Ukraine does not yet produce or not have. Certain incoming objects demand capabilities that only a handful of systems in the world can reliably provide. So no amount of improvisation replaces those overnight, obviously. But even here, expectations have shifted. The goal is no longer total protection, but intelligent prioritization. Ukraine's evolving air defense is not a marvel because it is flawless. It is remarkable because it exists at all, assembled under conditions designed to prevent exactly that. It reflects a shift from dependence to initiative, from scarcity to adaptation, and from rigid doctrine to relentless problem solving. Quiet lasers, improvised interceptors, and rapidly assembled networks are symptoms of a deeper change. A country learning to defend itself with whatever it has right now. There is no illusion that this path is comfortable or safe in the long term. Even the people building these systems understand the doors that they're opening. But the choice was never between caution and recklessness. It was just between action and vulnerability. Unfortunately, simple as that. Between imperfect protection and, well, none at all. As pressure continues and expectations grow, those leading this effort are painfully aware that results are demanded immediately. Not next quarter, not next year, but, well, yesterday. That urgency will not fade. If anything, it will only intensify. And whether these solutions become a blueprint for others or a warning depends on how the world responds to what Ukraine had already forced to invent. But for now, just one thing is perfectly crystally clear. Survival has become the most powerful driver of innovation, and is rewriting the rules faster than anyone expected. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel. If you wish to support our work, the links down below. For example, you can buy our merch. Hoodies, t-shirts, hats, caps, pants, shorts, pretty much everything, iPhone cases, mugs. Please go ahead and check, the link is down below. TheRussianDude.com is the website. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway.